Marvel's M.O.D.O.K is arguably one of the only Marvel shows that I wasn't hyped for when it was initially announced. In comparisons to shows such as WandaVision, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, or Marvel's What If, M.O.D.O.K was clearly going to be sitting at the lower end of the totem pole in terms of hype for me. Thankfully, me having low expectations and interest in M.O.D.O.K's first season was a good thing, because even with low expectations, it didn't necessarily fully click with me. Marvel's M.O.D.O.K has a somewhat entertaining first season, and I'd lie if I said differently. This show has a number of things going for it that could potentially keep people coming back and revisiting the show when other seasons come out. When you combine good animation, somewhat interesting storylines, certain jokes landing more so than others, depending on the viewer, and of course the voice acting, this is a show that a certain audience can love. In fact, out of that list, my personal favorite thing is the voice acting, and that's primarily because Melissa Fumero does such a good job at playing M.O.D.O.K's daughter, Melissa. Melissa plays arguably the most interesting character when she's on the screen, and a big part of that is because her character is so different from her role in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, where she plays Amy Santiago. Also, I have to give a shout out to Patton Oswalt, because you can tell he puts so much love into playing M.O.D.O.K, and it heavily shows whenever he's present, which is a lot. However, Marvel's M.O.D.O.K is honestly a mixed bag for me. The problem with this show is that it tries to achieve too much in too little of a time span. The first season of this show is 10 episodes that all range from 20 to 23 minutes. For me, it didn't feel like this show had enough time to truly establish and explore the various storylines in the first season. For instance, the core storyline of the first season is that M.O.D.O.K is basically a failed supervillain and he wants to become a better villain so he can finally take down Iron Man and the Avengers so he can build his own M.O.D.O.K City. At the same time, there are other storylines that take place, such as AIM being bought by another major company called Grumble, and M.O.D.O.K having to fight through the massive amount of changes that take place within AIM, M.O.D.O.K and his wife Jodie's, played by Amy Garcia, failing marriage, which then affects their kids, so the show decides to also explore what's going on emotionally with the kids, and then on top of all of that, there's another two-side storylines to go with those other storylines. Another struggle I had with this show is that due to the first season having this many storylines, it was honestly hard for me to maintain focus because this show would jump from one storyline to another just on an episode by episode basis. There were plenty of times that I had to rewind because I missed one or two important lines during an episode, and then by the time it dawned on me, I missed those important lines because there was already too much happening for me to understand what was going on. I also have to include the fact that the things I wanted to see explored and have deeper dives either got ignored or wasn't explored enough. When I thought the show was finally going to cut back to the things I wanted to see or explore that thing in the next episode, it would end up being a totally different storyline. This is the end result when you're trying to balance way too many things at once and can't figure out what you're attempting to achieve by the end of the season. It's honestly a lot for a first season of a show, and I say this as someone who somehow managed to stay up to date with various comic book universes such as the Arrowverse, MCU, and the DCEU as well. The bigger frustration that I had throughout the first season was that there's too much of M.O.D.O.K. If you're interested in this show, you better love M.O.D.O.K to the point where you're playing Marvel's Avengers, which has too much aim in it if you ask me, or you're heavily reading M.O.D.O.K comics because that's exactly what this show is about, M.O.D.O.K. With M.O.D.O.K being the core focus of this show, yes, I get it, it's called Marvel's M.O.D.O.K. There isn't enough breathing room to allow the other characters of this show to fully shine when they're in scenes, considering 90% of the scenes contain M.O.D.O.K in them. He consistently takes the spotlight away from his supporting cast. The only time characters get their own shining moments is when they're not with M.O.D.O.K, and those moments are way more rare than they should be. One of the main reasons this frustrates me is because this show doesn't allow the supporting cast to truly grow into their own characters. For instance, Melissa, M.O.D.O.K's daughter, is one of the best characters in the show, and she's easily the most entertaining one as well, but she barely gets enough spotlight to truly shine, which means the viewer doesn't get to appreciate her funny jokes or growth over the course of the season. Sure, she's just a teenage girl that's angry at her dad because she wants both her father's love and for her parents' marriage to not fail. But she also has interesting aspects to her that do get slightly shown later on in the season. Meanwhile, Lou, M.O.D.O.K's son, is a character who gets an entire episode dedicated to him just so M.O.D.O.K can have a point proven to him, but the point is so minimal and obvious that it could have been a smaller storyline within an episode while something that's more interesting was going on. Then there's my main problem with M.O.D.O.K. It has terrible humor. A huge aspect of Marvel's M.O.D.O.K is that it tries to paint itself as this comedic show despite having multiple serious storylines going on at the same time. That wouldn't be a huge problem if the show managed to actually take advantage of its mature rating and actually have good quality jokes. For instance, a handful of jokes landed for me, such as, what's a hoobastank? The 90s Beatle, what's the Beatles? The 50s hoobastank. However, most of the time, the jokes just fall flat and are pretty poor compared to other comic book shows. To give you a few examples, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier manages to handle multiple series storylines, but still have funny banter and jokes between Bucky and Sam. The Flash has comedic relief with Cisco, who's always throwing out funny jokes or great pop culture references, and WandaVision has funny jokes that are both references to the MCU and to many other shows that inspired the creation of WandaVision. Meanwhile, throughout M.O.D.O.K, the show thinks it's funny, but it's simply not. The jokes were so bad sometimes that I would roll my eyes because it was just trying too hard to be something it didn't need to try and be. For example, in the episode centered around M.O.D.O.K's son, there's a bunch of goats in the episode, and every single time a goat is on the screen, they do the infamous viral sheep scream. Yes, that viral sheep scream. The first time the show did it, it got a chuckle out of me and I was like, oh damn, I haven't heard that in a long time. Over the course of the episode, they choose to do that same joke way more times than it needed to. I get it, it was funny the first time, but it wasn't funny the second, third, fourth, fifth, or sixth time. I don't even hate this show or think it's this god-awful show that's entirely poor to the point where it's not worth someone's time. The problem with M.O.D.O.K is that it's trying so hard to be so many things at once that in order to enjoy this show, it almost feels like you need to like a culmination of things. If not, you might feel the same way as me, but those feelings could be about other aspects of the show. It's hard to not see the potential with M.O.D.O.K and see that if they went in other directions creatively, it could have honestly had a very strong first season. The entirety of the first season had so many good ideas or potentially exciting ideas, but with such a gigantic lack of focus, M.O.D.O.K rapidly began to fall flat for me, and it sucks because I thought, okay, maybe by episode 10 it'll pay off, but it never truly did. Sure, there were key moments where I was like, finally, something worth actually being excited about, but those were so far and few between that it never really felt like it was worth my time. If these episodes had longer runtime so these episodes could actually explore all of the concept they're trying to sell to the viewer, this first season might have actually had a better end result. Honestly, I don't even feel like M.O.D.O.K needed its mature rating because it doesn't necessarily get utilized often enough to truly justify that rating. Which then makes me wonder, what if Marvel made this an actual focus for them and made it a core Disney Plus show to establish M.O.D.O.K in the MCU instead? It's disappointing because it genuinely feels like these voice actors are having their talent wasted by the people writing the storylines for this show. As I said earlier, it's hard to not appreciate the well-rounded voice acting cast and the chemistry they have throughout the course of the show. The chemistry amongst the characters is viable, entertaining, and something that I wish was explored in a different direction compared to what we got from M.O.D.O.K's first season. Am I gonna end up watching a potential season 2 of M.O.D.O.K if that were to happen? I mean, maybe. It would kind of depend on what's currently going on with other comic book shows. There are so many different comic book shows that I would much prefer to watch over M.O.D.O.K, such as any of the upcoming Marvel Disney Plus shows, Titans, Doom Patrol, Harley Quinn, The Umbrella Academy, and even some of the shows in the Arrowverse. Once again, M.O.D.O.K isn't terrible, and it's not god-awful. It's just not a show that I thoroughly enjoyed as a viewer with an open mind. Do I see my opinion being an unpopular opinion? Maybe, but that doesn't necessarily bother me, nor change my mind or emotions when it comes to my opinion about Season 1 of M.O.D.O.K. It's just something that unfortunately wasn't satisfying to me, and with the landscape of comic book and pop culture media, there's probably so many other shows that'll likely become a bigger priority to me that M.O.D.O.K will sit on the back burner if there are new seasons in the future. That sucks, but it is what it is. As always, if you enjoyed this video, hit that like button. If you really enjoyed this video, hit that sub button. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, write a comment down below. Don't forget to keep it real with peace, love, and positivity.